In 524 BC, 50,000 soldiers march into the Egyptian desert. None of them come back. You'll see the exact moment Herodotus says the army simply ceased to exist. You'll find out why a pair of Italian archaeologists think they found the bones in 2009, and why the experts are calling them out. And you'll learn why the most unsettling explanation for all this isn't a sandstorm, it's a cover-up. Picture yourself standing at the edge of the Sahara. Not the postcard version, the real one, a flat, white, merciless expanse where the horizon shimmers and the air itself seems hostile. No shade, no landmarks, no sound except wind. Now imagine 50,000 men walking into that. That's not metaphor. That is, according to Herodotus, exactly what happened. Cambyses II, king of Persia, conqueror of Egypt, is not a man who takes insults quietly. He has just crushed the pharaoh Psamtik III. Egypt is his. But there's a problem. Out in the western desert, 8 days from any reliable water source, sits the oasis of Siwa. And at Siwa lives the Oracle of Amun, one of the most respected prophetic voices in the ancient world. The oracle had reportedly questioned Cambyses' legitimacy. He decides to destroy it. Here's where the story gets strange, and it stays strange. Cambyses dispatches his army from the city of Thebes, or possibly from somewhere near modern Luxor. Ancient sources aren't precise on this. They march northwest into the desert. Herodotus says there were 50,000 of them. And then, nothing. No survivors, no messages, no body ever found. At least not for 2,500 years. The army simply walks into the desert and vanishes. Think about that scale for a second. 50,000 people. That's not a patrol, that's not a scouting party, that's a city, marching into nothing. Even by ancient standards, losing an army of that size without a single confirmed survivor returning to explain what happened is extraordinary. I keep coming back to that detail. Someone always survives. Someone always gets back. Deserters, stragglers. The guy who twisted his ankle on day 2 and turned around. But here, silence. Herodotus, writing roughly a century after the event, gives us the only real ancient account. He says the army was struck by a massive sandstorm, what he describes as a wind blowing from the south, and was buried where it stood. That's the explanation. A storm swallowed them. Now, Herodotus is our best source here, and Herodotus is also a man who will write down almost anything he was told. He's invaluable. He's also not above a good story, and 50,000 men buried alive by a single sandstorm is an extraordinarily good story. Let's take the sandstorm theory seriously, though, because it's not impossible. Haboobs, massive sand and dust storms, can be catastrophic. They move fast. They're disorienting. An army caught in open desert without shelter could suffer serious casualties from exposure, suffocation, dehydration in the aftermath. But here's what bothers me about it. Sandstorms bury things. They also unbury them. The Sahara is dynamic. Dunes shift, winds reverse, layers of sand churn over centuries. If 50,000 men with iron weapons, bronze armor, supply carts, and camp equipment were buried in one location, some trace should have surfaced by now. The desert is not a perfect vault. The second theory is grimmer and more mundane. They ran out of food and water. The western desert crossing to Siwa is brutal even today with vehicles and GPS. For an ancient army moving on foot, it could become a death march within days of a miscalculation. Disorientation, dwindling supplies, wrong turns. An army that size doesn't die cleanly in one spot. It scatters. People break off. Small groups make for the nearest oasis or backtrack toward the Nile. And yet, no survivors surface in the historical record. That's the part this theory can't explain. Which brings us to the third theory, the one I find most interesting and most troubling. What if some of them made it back? What if the army didn't vanish, but the record of them did? Think about what it means for a Persian king if this expedition fails. Cambyses has just conquered Egypt. His authority in the region is brand new and brittle. An army of 50,000, dispatched on a religious purge, wiped out before it even reached its target. That is a propaganda catastrophe. The ancient world had no free press, no independent historians embedded with armies. What kings did not want remembered had a way of not being remembered. Cambyses dies in 522 BC, only 2 years after the army's disappearance, under circumstances that are themselves disputed. He never returned to deal with the oracle. His reign falls apart. The new Persian administration under Darius had every reason to quietly close the file on an embarrassing military disaster. Deliberate erasure isn't a conspiracy theory, it's standard practice for ancient empires. The evidence here gets thin, but the logic is uncomfortably solid. Now, 2009, two Italian archaeologists, Angelo and Alfredo Castiglione, announce that they have found the lost army. In the western desert, near the Siwa road, they recover bones, human bones scattered across a wide area. Bronze weapons, a silver bracelet. They believe these are the remains of Cambyses' force. The discovery makes international headlines. You can find the articles easily. And then the Egyptologists weigh in. The skepticism is pointed and specific. The bones show no consistent dating. There's no controlled archaeological excavation. The material is found scattered on the surface, exposed by wind erosion without proper stratigraphic context. The Castigliones are not professional archaeologists. They're explorers with a history of dramatic claims. Zahi Hawass, then head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities, is direct. He says the find is not credible. Other specialists note that the Western Desert is full of human remains from various periods. You cannot simply find bones and bronze and declare them Persian. The evidence here gets thin very fast. So where does that leave us? We have a credible ancient source describing an event that defies easy explanation. We have a plausible natural mechanism that still doesn't fully account for the silence. We have a political context that makes a cover-up entirely conceivable. And we have a splashy archaeological claim that hasn't survived peer review. The lost army of Cambyses is like a locked room with the key inside. Every explanation requires you to break a window. Here's what I think, and I'll own this. The pure sandstorm burial theory is too clean. I don't buy that a single storm erases 50,000 people and every artifact they carried without a trace surfacing in 2,500 years of desert movement. I think something more complicated happened. A catastrophic desert crossing. Weather, starvation, disorientation, fragmentation. Survivors who returned in small numbers, traumatized and discredited, and a Persian court with strong incentives to let the story die. The desert did its part. So did human memory. The Oracle of Amun at Siwa survived. It was still consulted centuries later by Alexander the Great, who walked the same desert and made the same crossing, and came out the other side. Whatever happened to Cambyses' army, it never reached Siwa. 50,000 men, a 400-mile crossing, and somewhere out there in the western desert, under sand that is still shifting, the answer may still be waiting. Or it was already found, and buried again deliberately in the oldest archive in the world. The silence of a king who didn't want to lose. Subscribe. There are more files where this one came from.